Mercy, mercy, mercy.
Hello, welcome to this playlist, which is devoted to an analysis and a discussion of the Divine Mercy Devotion. This is the fourth video in this playlist. The first video is linked down below. Sister Faustina claimed that she achieved divine union with God. I suddenly saw the Lord Jesus who spoke these words to me. That is why I am uniting myself with you so intimately as with no other creature. Therefore, it seems fair to compare and contrast what is in her diary to what is set forth by St. John of the Cross in Ascent of Mount Carmel, which is essentially a handbook on how to achieve divine union. Please note that we're not judging or trying to judge the soul of Sister Faustina. What we're trying to do is judge the veracity and the catholicity of what she wrote in her diary. For those of you who haven't checked out the Ascent of Mount Carmel playlists, you might want to do so. Just go back to the channel page and check them out in numerical order. The book, Ascent of Mount Carmel, is divided into 3 parts. We're going to do this comparison methodically by working our way through Ascent of Mount Carmel. Book 1 deals with the dark night of the senses and how we need to darken ourselves to the pleasures of our senses. And this is because all these types of things distract us from God. We're best to purge ourselves of all the noise and the neon lights and glitter of the world and wait in loving attentiveness for God. Please note that there aren't a lot of problems with Sister Faustina's diary when it's juxtaposed against the first book of Ascent of Mount Carmel. It seems that for the most part, Sister Faustina did a pretty good job of fasting and performing other acts of mortifications. But how do we know that she did that? Well, it's because she wrote about it, knowing and intending that her diary would be read by others. And according to her diary, she also repeatedly discussed it with her superiors. And this is problematic. And when you fast, be not as the hypocrites said, that thou would appear not to men to fast, but to thy Father who is in secret, and thy Father who seeth in secret, and he will repay thee. If we wish to advance in our spirituality, we should be doing our fasting and mortifications in secret. However, to be fair to Sister Faustina, she was instructed to keep that diary of her experiences by her spiritual director. And actually, this was horrible spiritual direction and really contrary to the development of Sister Faustina's spirituality. And we'll discuss this more in a future installment on this playlist. St. John of the Cross wrote, "It is supreme ignorance for the soul to think that it will be able to pass to this highest state of union with God if it doesn't first void the desire of all things, natural and supernatural. If our souls are filled with these things of the senses, there's a large space in our soul that is filled with something that isn't God. And if we hope to achieve divine union, we need to purge ourselves of these desires for those things to make room for God." So as we said, Sister Faustina did do a pretty good job of mortifying her desires for most things of the senses, and better than most of us could. However, she seemed to lack a self-awareness when she did fail in this area. "When I fell ill and was taken to the infirmary, I suffered much unpleasantness because of this. There were 2 of us sick in the infirmary. Sisters would come to see Sister N, but no one would come to see me. The winter nights were long, and Sister N had the light and the radio headphones, while I couldn't even prepare my meditation for lack of light." So, Sister Faustina seemed to be jealous of Sister N for having radio headphones. St. John of the Cross instructs us to reject desires for these types of pleasures. When the soul deprives its desire of the pleasure of all that can delight the sense of hearing, for instance, the soul remains unoccupied and in darkness with respect to this faculty, so that the soul that has denied and thrust away from itself the pleasures which come from all these things, and has mortified its desire with respect to them, may be said to be, as it were, in the darkness of night, which is nothing else than an emptiness within itself of all things. Sister Faustina, like most of us, couldn't see the jealousy in herself, and St. John explains why this is so. "Desires darken and blind the soul. The soul that would attain divine union should be free from desires, however slight they might be." The problems with Sister Faustina's diary, when contrasted against the Ascent of Mount Carmel, primarily begin with the second book. And that describes how, if we hope to journey to God, we must use faith as our guide and we should not rely on our senses or our understanding. When we get to chapter 11 of the second book, the problems with the Divine Mercy devotion become very obvious. And from that point on, through the rest of the book, it seems that almost everything that Faustina wrote in her diary was 180 degrees opposite of what St. John of the Cross sets out for us in Ascent of Mount Carmel. In chapter 11, St. John wrote, "What we have to treat will be solely those kinds of knowledge and those apprehensions which belong to the understanding and come supernaturally by way of the outward bodily senses, namely, by seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. With respect to all these, there may come, and there are wont to come, to spiritual persons, representations and objects of a supernatural kind. With respect to sight, they are apt to picture figures and forms of persons belonging to the life to come, the forms of certain saints and representations of angels." Now, this was certainly the case with Sister Faustina. There are numerous examples in her diary describing how she saw angels, saints, and even God. She wrote, "I saw my guardian angel." But St. John of the Cross writes, "Although these things may happen to the bodily senses in the way of God, we must never rely upon them or accept them, but must always fly from them, without trying to ascertain whether they be good or evil. For the more completely exterior and corporeal they are, the less certainly they are from God." Though her spiritual director should have instructed Sister Faustina that these very corporeal visions would be less certainly from God and should have been rejected, instead, he encouraged her. Sister Faustina wrote, "Then I saw the Lord Jesus, as he is represented in the image, and he said to me, 'Tell the confessor that this work is mine, and that I am using you as a lowly instrument.'" So the entity that represented itself as Jesus told Sister Faustina that the work of the Divine Mercy devotion was his, and that he was using her as a lowly instrument. St. John wrote, "He that esteems such things," meaning spiritual visions, "errs greatly and exposes himself to a great peril of being deceived. In any case, he will have within himself a complete impediment to the attainment of spirituality." And did Sister Faustina esteem these spiritual visions? "I would not want to change places with even a seraph, as regards to the interior knowledge of God which he himself has given me. The intimate knowledge that I have of the Lord is of such as no creature can comprehend." In contrast to this, St. John wrote, "And thus it may always be supposed that such things as these are more likely to be of the devil than of God. For the devil has more influence in that which is exterior and corporeal, and can deceive a soul more easily thereby than by that which is more interior and spiritual." So while Sister Faustina should have been fleeing from these very exterior and corporeal visions, instead she is receiving instructions and acting out and obeying them. Sister Faustina wrote to the entity that was in these visions, "I will give you complete freedom in directing my soul. Guide me along the paths you wish. I don't question them. I will follow you trustingly." So St. John tells us the more attention a soul pays to these things, the further it strays from the true way and means, which are faith. Besides all this, when a soul sees that such extraordinary things happen to it, it is often visited insidiously and secretly by a secret complacency, so that it thinks itself to be some importance in the eyes of God, which is contrary to humility. We've already cited several examples of where Sister Faustina seemed to think that she held special importance in the eyes of God. And here's another quote that shows her lack of humility. "On one occasion, a certain person suffered because of my sanctity." St. John wrote, "The devil too knows how to insinuate into a soul the secret satisfaction with itself, which at times becomes very evident. Wherefore he frequently represents these objects to the senses, setting before the eyes figures of the saints, and to that end by producing desires for such things that may lead the soul into much evil. These representations and feelings therefore must always be rejected." Well, that's all the time we have for today. But we'll be back again in about a week, and we'll pick up again where we were leaving off now. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page, which is linked down below, and please pray for the church.
Mercy, mercy, babe. Ooh, Lord, have mercy on me. Well, I've done somebody wrong.